move into the consent agenda. We've got approval of bills, city and BPU claims of August 31st, payroll of August 31st. City Council minutes of September 5th, Finance minutes of September 5th, Public Service Committee minutes of September 11th, Hillsdale College noise variance request for a drive-in movie, the American Legion Fall Freedom 5K run, a right-of-way use agreement for Sean's 5K walk run for cancer event, which is this Saturday, the Hillsdale County Fair Parade use agreement, and then the right-of-way permit for Hillsdale Community Schools. Any discussion on any of these items? Councilman Soha.
Are this new fee structure apply to all of these right-of-way use agreements?
So we passed the new fee structure, would have been in May, I think, and the way that it's written right now, there are no exemptions for it. But I think, Councilman Briner's onto something. I was recently part of a conversation that and I know I talked to a couple council members about it already, but I'll share it amongst the table, that the light up parade got a quote for $2,048.88 to hold the light up parade. We're kind of in the same situation here with the street closure for this Scarecrow Fest thing. I think that it would not do us harm to revisit the fee structure and talk about particulars and maybe talk about exemptions for certain events. I understand why we needed to make the increases, and I understand that we all voted for them. They were in the consent agenda, so not a lot of discussion happened about them, but it's not uncommon that, things get passed and then we look at them and say, I didn't take this into account. So I think Ray's right to bring up that we might be cutting off our nose to spite our face over a couple $1,000s here and there. So, any more discussion on any of the items in the consent agenda? Councilman Wolford?
Yeah, I was also going to comment on this, that the light up parade and the fair parade and those things all bring a lot of people into town, and that is something that it's good to have people coming in and seeing the city, and that they might not have been coming into town for any other reason, and now they see here and they see there's a restaurant that they can go to. And so I was not here in April when this passed, so if I'd been here, I'd probably say let's think about that. But anyway, I do think you're right that we should be able to have a mechanism by which we can reduce that fee substantially. Maybe just have a small fee, but to really, I do think that we're going to make it less for these entities that are putting these events together. It's going to be a strain for some of them. So I agree with your point there.
Absolutely. So do we want to have a public services meeting, and Councilman Sharp?
All you have to do is, if you want people in town, look Saturday. Come down and check the farmers market out. That downtown is live. And we're not charging them anything. And we don't want to. We want to encourage the downtown because it helps the downtown businesses. Just talk to any of them down there, they love it. I mean, you go to Hillsdale, you look at Hillsdale at 9 o'clock in the morning, that place is packed. Go through at 3. Take a good look. It's empty. It looks like a ghost town. I'm sorry to say that, but it does. But I don't want to charge for, I want to encourage to have parades here. This is kind of crazy when you hear that. Thank you, Ray, too, Mr. Briner, for bringing it to our attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Sharp. I do want to clarify, we are charging the farmers market according to the new fee schedule, but there are ways to offset it, like bringing your own barriers, so they're not getting that excessive charge. But there was a lot of frustrated discussions at the beginning of the farmers market because of the fee schedule. So don't want anybody to think they're getting special treatment. They are getting charged for the street closure, which they have an option that they can hold it in the Hillsdale County Courthouse lawn always if they wanted to offset that, but parades,
So I agree with you, we should set it to
Public Services Committee?
That's usually the ones.
Hey, you guys wanna have another meeting?
Yeah, we've been enjoying them. Yeah, we just talked about the fee structure generally, a few points about it. Main thing is covering the city's costs, but I mean, ultimately, who's gonna have to pay for these things if the city doesn't cover its costs is gonna be the businesses that are there permanently. So, I understand people are seeing this as a sort of a new tax on mobile businesses, right? But they're coming in, they're setting up shop, they don't have to pay property taxes. They make all their money in 3 hours and they get out of there, right? But then the ghost town is left that's still paying the property taxes. So, you know, discussing equalization would be great. Discussing a way to make sure we don't drive them out is great, but also we can't lose money on it.
Okay. Alright. So, we're just specifically right now talking about the holding a Public Services Committee meeting to revisit the fee schedule. And look for, I mean, you guys are smart, you guys can figure out a way to come up with exemptions or reductions on a case-to-case basis based on what the event is, I think. Yeah? Councilman Beer?
Just going to Tom, can you weigh in on a little bit of this as far as the flexibility on if you have fee schedules and to give certain entities, whether it be nonprofits, exemption from those fees?
You would want to have very clear criteria for determining who does and doesn't have to pay, or who does or doesn't get a reduction. So it can't be something where it's subject to discretion, because if it is, you open up the whole can of worms. Well, how come that guy got it and I didn't get it? Is it because that guy's got a friend on the city council, or that sort of thing? So you'd want to make sure that it's not something that's discretionary, that you've got criteria that would specifically establish who has to pay the full total, who gets a break, and how that's determined. So it's in effect like an administrative checkoff kind of function. Okay, you fall under this box. But yeah, I mean, you're the city council. If you wanted to charge, because it's not a tax, remember, or at least the parade kind of thing. It's a fee to cover the city's costs. So the city could give some organizations relief from that if it wanted to. But again, you want to make sure you specify what the criteria is for you to qualify for that.
Tom, could you do that in regards to, like, a lot of times with zoning, if you have a non-compliant, that, like, are these things that we've been doing for multiple years, like the fair parade, even for that community schools homecoming parade, that we've been doing on multiple years prior to us coming up with this fee schedule, would it be legal to exempt those existing events that we've always done in the past?
I think you're running a slippery slope there if you do that. I don't know that that would be enforceable. There are a lot of different things that could come up as objections to that people could raise. Some of them could be on a free speech basis, right? Because I have an organization wants to have a parade or gathering in the city, and you're telling me I can't do it, but these guys over here can do it. Well, I might say that that's because you don't like what my organization has to say or what it stands for or that sort of thing, right? So if you were going to make those distinctions, you have to make sure that whatever criteria you're making them on is something that's clear and on the basis of something that seems like it's rational and it's not something that is arbitrary or capricious in terms of how you determine who gets the benefit of it or not. Like, for example, if you're a nonprofit organization, if you're a 501c3 and you've been qualified as a charitable organization, that sort of thing, that you get a break. And if you're not, then you don't. So those would be the kinds of things I might look at in terms of what what may or may not fly. And that's without me having done any research to see if there's any case law that says what you may or may not be able to do from that perspective. But my initial thought is you need to have, if you're going to do it, if you do it in any particular fashion in terms of giving breaks to people, you at least would have to have that kind of very firm criteria.
Thanks.
Councilman Wolford?
Yeah, but also we ought to sort of realize that when they hold a parade, they're providing entertainment for people, and they can't charge you, right? It's what we call common property resource, right? So they can't charge you, but it's not like you're not benefiting from the parade. You know, I'm benefiting from the parade just being there. And so, you know, to sort of argue that, well, you know, the rest of the city is having to pay for this thing. I mean, partly maybe you could think of it as the city providing this resource to all its constituency, that they have these events that they can go to. So I just wanted to point out that there's an advantage to all the citizenry from having these things go on.
Councilman Sharp?
Do we charge the high school for homecoming parade then, or are we gonna do that?
We're gonna have to now.
Okay.
Any more discussion? So public services can meet. I like Tom's suggestion to have a checklist. That's how we do it on zoning board of appeals. Is this zoning variance going to affect your neighbor's property? Is this zoning variance unreasonable? Just, you know, half dozen items maybe. Checklist. Anyways, you guys are smart. You'll figure it out. All the faith in the world. Rob.
Tom, could we do a reprieve right now for this year until we reassess everything?
You've adopted the schedule, so you would have to take some legislative action to want to do that, if that's what you wanted to do. In other words, once you've enacted something that's sort of the law of the city, because you're the legislative body for the city, so if you want to have that exempted, you actually have to take legislative action to do that, which would require.
We need to have a meeting because we went through this with farmers market. There was a lot of heated discussions and arguments. I think they'd be really upset if we just snapped our fingers and changed it right now and didn't do that for them when they were objecting so strongly to the new schedule of fees.
That's fair. I was just thinking about all of these that we're approving today or before our next meeting. So I was just thinking out loud, I guess. I mean, I think the farmers market would understand. I'd be in favor of legislatively today suspending fees for parades through the end of the fiscal year, if anyone wants to discuss that.
Well, would we just suspend all the fees, or would we revert to the fees that we had before we passed the new schedule of fees? Because we've always had some fees for these sorts of events. Jason, will you come up here and?
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to the farmer's market, they did pay the new fee. What got them, I don't say got out of them, but lowered that fee was they, on their own, went and rented all their traffic control from Spark Barricade. They did have the hospital, from what I understand, go sponsor for them as well. So they did take up on themselves to do all that work to do that. And one thing I would ask if we can at least have a public service meeting to discuss this, if we could, before we strict some of the fees or all the fees where we go. Some of the stuff, the information I have, some MCLs, MCL 123.851 talks about what can and can't be an expenditure. So I'd like to share that with the Public Service Committee if we can before we have it on.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
And I would.
I'll make a motion that we send it to Public Services then.
Okay. Okay. Motion on the floor from Councilman Sharp, seconded by Councilman.
You got one more, sir.
I know. I was waiting for the.
We're just gonna fix that one quick.
Yeah. This is just to send it to the meeting. So.
Yes, they have it.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Sharp, seconded by Councilman Morrissey. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I know we haven't approved the consent agenda yet. What is it, Todd?
That's okay. One thing I was going to add, so when you do take a look at it in committee, and this sort of dovetails probably with some of the private entities without obtaining fair value for them, right? So there may be some issues related to that. If as you go through and look at it, you'd like for me to do some research as to what the constraints of that are before your meeting, let me know when that is. And I can give you an idea of what you can or can't do, so you know kind of what the playing field is legally for that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And I just want to say right now, and this is not lecturing you guys because I voted for this too, but we gotta think about these things, guys, before we pass them. We just passed this in May, and obviously I didn't ask the right questions, and the rest of us didn't. So it's a failure on my part. So don't think I'm lecturing you, about Councilman Beer.
We passed the new fee schedules from Jason, basically bringing them in line and actually more into line with the cost that it's resulting in the city. So now granted, we might have jumped the gun a tad, but at the same time, going back to what Tom said too, as a council, we cannot give away city assets just because we think that the benefit is, I mean, we just aren't allowed legally to do that. So I say as far as when we maybe go back to it, have, just for discussion purposes, figure out what the actual cost for each of these services is and adjust the fees accordingly, I guess.
Thank you, Councilman Beer. Josh?
I was just gonna add that in our conversation with Jason, I'm pretty sure the criteria was the cost to the city, right? I don't think we're making money on any of these, and I'm pretty sure his attempt was to equalize, right? They have billable hours, they have material costs, all these things. It was just to make one-to-one.
Well, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Councilman Holford.
Well, what if the city did a fireworks display? And so people could watch it, right? And would that be giving away city resources to do that? Because I'm trying to make the connection like I was trying to make before, that these things are providing a service to the individuals in the city by having these things available for us to see, and there's no mechanism for the entity that's providing it to charge the people who are watching it, just like you can't, effectively charge people to watch the fireworks. So I would like to sort of present it from that angle.
Well, the difference might be that in your example, the city's doing it. The city is not expending money and giving it to a private entity. In effect, if you give a benefit to a private entity, you're giving away some of the resources that belong to the public. So, for example, you have to pay public officials, you have to use public equipment, you have to do that sort of thing, and that private entity gets the benefit of that without contributing anything in exchange for that. And that's sort of the reason that's one of the main reasons that's an element of the law in Michigan is it helps make sure that it's sort of an anti-corruption measure, right? Because far too often, somebody who knows somebody within the local government or the state government or whatever it may be, and their private outfit gets the benefit of something when maybe somebody else's does not. And so that's pretty firmly entrenched in Michigan law. Now, how much of that relates to this discussion, I'd have to look at to tell you what, again, the constraints of that would be. The city can do it because the city's not giving that benefit to a specific private entity. But if a private entity is holding the fireworks, which typically one of the things they do is they might get sponsors to help defray the cost, not only the cost of the fireworks, but to the extent that you have to have police presence and that sort of thing, you get a permit, they have people sponsor it and provide the money to be able to pay for those costs. Because in the alternative, the city has to pay for it, and then the determination has to be made, is it worth it, right? So, from a legal standpoint, that's what I'm talking about. That's a matter of longstanding Michigan law, and it's deemed to be a constitutional law.
Yeah, but I would argue that the entity is providing the service by having the parade. It's not like that the entity is gaining from this. The entity, I'm arguing that entity is providing the service to the rest of us by having the parade.
Unfortunately, under state law, that one's not gonna fly. If you're standing in front of a court under Michigan law, that's not the type of service that they're talking about. They're talking about a service, for example, the best example I can use is giving money to, have a contract every year with domestic harmony, right? And it used to be that they would come around and ask for a donation. You can't make that kind of donation to a private entity. But what you can do is you can have a contract with them if they're providing a service that would otherwise be provided by the municipality. Well, a municipality typically doesn't provide parades. These are entities that want to have a parade, but most cities themselves don't necessarily sponsor parades. If they do, they pay for it out of their coffers. It's not like there's a contract with a separate entity, like for example, used to happen in Detroit with the Thanksgiving Day parade. There was a parade company, literally called the Parade Company, that handled taking care of the Detroit Hudson's Thanksgiving Day parade every year. Well, that entity did receive funding, but it is a quasi-private entity or public entity that provides for that parade that was formed to do that, and they enter into a contract with them to do the thing that the city otherwise used to do.
Thank you, Tom. Team, we've got a public hearing tonight. We've got 7 new item agendas. We haven't got through the consent agenda yet, and we've already scheduled a public services meeting. So can we please move on from this? Yeah? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Support.
Motion on the floor from Councilman Morrissey, seconded by Councilman Sharp. Can I have a roll call, City Clerk?
Councilmember Palladino.
Yes.
Pratt. Yes. Sharp.
Yes.
Soha.
Yes.
Stuchel.
Yes.
Beer.
Yes.
Wolfram.
Yes.
Mayor Stockford.
Yes.
Councilperson Morrissey.
Yes.
9-0 approved.
Thank you, Katie. We will